what happens is they're growing these commodity crops that the government's basically supporting them funding of wheat, corn, and soy, but you're not eating wheat berries or whole grain. You're not eating true whole soybeans. You're not eating just corn on the cob. These are deconstructed in factories and basically science labs into their molecular components, are torn apart and rebuilt into these chemically extruded food-like substances of all colors, sizes, and shapes that are not by definition food. If you look up the Webster's Dictionary definition of food, it's not actually technically food. And so what most Americans are eating is stuff that actually is harmful, that's causing disease and killing people. It's literally, think about it, the equivalent of 2 Holocausts a year are caused by the food we're eating, according to the Global Burden of Disease Study. So how do you know when you see it? You said 70% of our grocery store offerings are ultra-processed food. The labeling, food labeling is a big issue and is one of our key initiatives. I think if we move forward in this administration, it has to be addressed. People need informed consent. They need to be empowered with the right information. They need to know what they're eating, whether it's good or bad for them. And now you need to be a PhD scientist to read a nutrition label or read the ingredients and know what it means. So I avoid the Nilla wafers. That's I guess if you look at the ingredient list, it should be stuff you know. It should say tomatoes or salt or pepper. That's the measurement. Yeah. If you see stuff like butylated hydroxytoluene, probably not something you want to be eating. And many of these chemicals that we use in America are outlawed in other countries, in Europe and Singapore and many other countries. These compounds that have been validated to show that how harmful they are to human beings have been removed from the marketplace. And we should follow those standards here. So labeling is really key, and we're going to work on that. But right now, if you're just trying to figure it out, look at the ingredient list. If there's stuff there that you wouldn't have on your kitchen counter or you wouldn't have in your pantry, don't eat it. If it says maltodextrin, where's your maltodextrin jar in your spice jar? Where's your butylated hydroxytoluene? Do you sprinkle that on your salad? No.
If you don't understand it, don't eat it.
Yeah. I mean, things can have a long list of ingredients. If you eat Indian foods, they have lots of spices. That's fine. It's real food. But if it's something that is in Latin that you don't understand, can't pronounce, or it has a health claim on the label, it's probably not good for you. I mean, like Lay's potato chips now says they're gluten-free. I mean, that's ridiculous, right? Oh, it's gluten-free. It's healthy. No, it's not. Gluten-free.
Well, it's gluten-free because there's no wheat in it, right?
Well, of course, but Coca-Cola is gluten-free. So, like, my rule is if it has a health claim on the label, don't eat it.
If there's a health claim on the label.
But if it's low fat, high fiber, low cholesterol, if it's no sugar, if it's, gluten free, it's hiding something. They're hiding something, right? It's just food. I mean, tomato doesn't say gluten free on it, right? It's just a tomato.
So that limits your options.
Well, you know what?
You're going to lose weight just from scarcity at that point.
You know what's amazing? I had this view that it was people's fault they were fat. And I went down as part of this movie called Fed Up that I did with Katie Couric and Lori David about 10 years ago. We went to South Carolina, and I went to Easley, South Carolina, one of the poorest areas in America, one of the worst food deserts in America. There's something called the Retail Environment Food Index, how many fast food and junk food and bodegas there are compared to grocery stores. They're like 10 to 1. And this family of 5 lived in a trailer. They were on disability and food stamps, and they wanted to sort of get healthy. And I asked them, why do you want to get healthy? Because I'm like, why do you want to be in this movie? They said, well, my dad's 42. He has type 2 diabetes from the food he ate. He has kidney failure. He's on dialysis. He's going to die unless he loses 40 pounds. And we can't get him to lose 40 pounds. We don't know what to do. The mother was well over 150 pounds overweight. The son was 16 years old, almost diabetic, 50% body fat. It should be 10 to 20%. I said, rather than giving a lecture about what to do and what to eat, I said, let's go to your house. Let's go shopping, get some simple foods that are inexpensive, that are whole foods, that are healthy to eat. So we made turkey chili. This was from Good Food on a Tight Budget, a guide from the Environmental Working Group. I said, here's turkey chili. Here's how to roast some sweet potatoes. Here's how to stir fry asparagus. Here's how to make a salad from not just iceberg lettuce, but some real lettuce. Here's olive oil and vinegar dressing.
Iceberg is not real lettuce?
No. It's pretty much nutritionally vapid food. I would not.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, it's fine if you want to eat it, but it's not fully dense with phytochemicals and nutrients. Oh. And so we basically showed them, and I went through their cupboards, everything in their cupboard. They had low fat this and Cool Whip they thought was healthy because it said no trans fats, but the FDA with the inclusion with the food industry allowed a food to say no trans fats that have less than half a gram per serving. So basically they're just duping the American public, and we need clear transparency and information. So they didn't know what they were eating, and everything was frozen or packaged or canned or boxed. They never cooked anything. They didn't have cutting boards. They didn't have knives. They never cooked anything in their kitchen. And so we made turkey chili. We made this whole meal. We sat down and ate it, and it was so delicious. And the son goes, Dr. Hyman, Hyman, do you like this for your family every night? I'm like, yeah, I do. And it wasn't hard. It wasn't difficult. It didn't take much time. And I said, listen, I don't know if you can do this, but here's this guide on how to eat well for less. Here's my cookbook on how to actually eat healthy, and try it. And on the plane, I sent them cutting boards and knives because they didn't have anything to cut. I mean, we were cutting like with a butter knife, trying to cut sweet potatoes. It was ridiculous, hard sweet potatoes.
They had no utensils in there.
Nothing, not for cooking, right? And so the first week, the mother texted me back. She said, Mark, we lost 18 pounds. I'm like, amazing. And a year, they lost over 200 pounds as a family. The father lost 45, got a new kidney. The mother lost 100 plus pounds. The son lost 50, but he went to work at Bojangles and gained it back. He said it was like putting an alcoholic to work in a bar. And then he gained all the weight back. And then he called me a few years later. He said, Mark, can you help me? I was like, yeah. He said, Dr. Hyman, but yeah. I said, yeah. And so I coached him and got him. He lost 132 pounds. And he's the first kid in his family to go to college. He wrote me a letter. He said, Mark, can you write me a letter of recommendation for medical school? And now he's a doctor. So, and he lost all that weight. So what that taught me was that it's really about education, about information, about skills. I don't know if you know this story, but
hold on. Yes, but you can know the right path and not take it. There's a compulsion attached to certain kinds of food.
100%. And this is well documented, Tucker.
It is well documented.
Well documented. And the studies are published. There was a large study published reviewing all the literature on food addiction. And there's something called the Yale Food Addiction Scale, which is questions you can look it up online. You just answer the questions, and it tells you if you're a food addict. Just as if you can do a questionnaire to tell if you're an alcoholic. There's 14% of the adult population are alcoholics. 14% of people are food addicted, and 12% of children are food addicted by the scientific definition of food addiction. Not just, this is addictive, but actually biologically addictive, measuring the things you need to measure to determine addiction. And so if that's true, you say compulsion, but it's really a hijack of our biochemistry. So the food industry has designed foods to hijack our biology. There's a book written by Michael Moss called Salt, Sugar, and Fat, where he interviewed 300 food industry executives and whistleblowers and scientists. And basically they said, look, we have taste institutes where we hire craving experts. These are their own terms, to create the bliss point of food, which is the maximum lighting up of your brain. And then we go for targeting marketing to heavy users. So they're not going to get me to drink a can of Coke, but they're going to get someone who's already having Coke to try to drink a 2-liter bottle. Right. And they know how to do that. And so the effects of these foods are so harmful on us, and they know what they're doing, and they actually design them to be this way. I mean, the tobacco companies bought a lot of the food companies back in the 70s, RJ Nabisco, Philip Morris Kraft, and they built this whole industry of ultra processed food. There's now 600,000 ultra processed food products. 80% of them are full of sugar, and they're the things that are driving most of the things that are wrong with America. If you look at food, it's the nexus for everything. One, obviously chronic disease, all the things we mentioned, heart disease, diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's, autoimmune diseases, just digestive disease, all the things, depression, mental health now is linked to ultra processed food. There's really well documented science on this, that these foods cause depression, anxiety. So we have all these foods that are being causing disease. Then we have the economic burden, which we talked about, almost $5 trillion. We have the effect on national security, because 77% of military recruits are rejected because they're unfit to fight. So we have a national security crisis, and 72% more evacuations were for obesity compared to war injuries from Iraq and Afghanistan. Think about that. In a war, more soldiers were evacuated because of obesity than because of war injuries. Academic performance, we're 30th something in the world in math and reading. Where kids are suffering. Our kids are on ADD medications.
So food makes you dumber, certain kinds of food.
100% makes you cognitively impaired, behavioral issues. There was one study, Tucker, where they took
that is true,
kids in juvenile detention centers, and they gave them healthy food, swapped it out for the junk food. 97% reduction in behavioral issues and violence, 75% reduction in restraints, and 100% reduction in suicides, which is the third leading cause of death in teenage boys. This is documented science. This is not stuff I'm making up. And I wrote in my book, Food Fix, which is really how to save our health, our economy, our communities, and our planet one bite at a time. And it talks about the nexus of all these issues. And then we have the effect on our soil. We've lost so much soil carbon. Soil has to be healthy to grow a healthy plant. And a healthy plant is what creates healthy humans. And the nutrients in plants have gone down by 50%. So even if you're eating your broccoli, it's less nutritious than it was 50 years ago.
She got to eat twice as much.
That's right, maybe. Yeah, you can do that. But still.
The best Christmas presents are the ones that you would give yourself. Well, this Christmas, we're recommending a gift that we do give ourselves. Meat from Merriweather Farms in Wyoming. So about 6 months ago, we'd interviewed a bunch of different health specialists, doctors, and nutritionists about food in the United States. And the consensus is it's not very good, particularly the meat. So we decided, let's search across the country and find a source of good, clean, tasty meat. Not all of it tastes very good, the clean stuff, by the way. So after trial and error, we settled on our all-time favorite, Merriweather Farms, and we really settled on it. So every time we have dinner with a guest before the show, which is often, we serve the exact same thing, steaks from Merriweather Farms. And every single time they've been excellent. Every guest has loved them. We eat them at home and at work. So we can recommend this with total heartfelt sincerity. And this year, Merriweather Farms makes it very easy for you to send their meat as a gift. They got all kinds of gift boxes. Their famous steaks, including Wagyu beef, roasts, burgers, hot dogs, beef stick snacks, everything you could possibly want, you can send to your loved ones from Merriweather Farms. The address, merriweatherfarms.com/Tucker. Use the promo code TuckerChristmas for a discount this year. We eat it. We recommend it. Merriweather. It's MERIWETHER farms.com/Tucker. Promo code TuckerChristmas at checkout. Highly, sincerely recommended.
And then, we have also the effect on biodiversity because of all the chemicals we're using. We have 75% less pollinators. No pollinators, it's hard to have agriculture. We have a 50% loss in bird species from the way we're growing food. We have destruction of our waterways because we use fertilizer that runs off into the rivers and lakes and streams and causes eutrophication, which basically grows the algae because of the extra fertilizer, and then sucks all the oxygen out of the water and all the fish die. So there's dead zones the size of New Jersey and the Gulf of Mexico. There's 400 around the planet that feed 500 million people. So this is all from the fertilizers, which uses actually 2% of the world's global energy to make fertilizer. But you don't need to do that if you use regenerative agriculture, which is what actually one of the things that I think this new administration should focus on, which is how do you fix the farming? Because you got to start at the field to fix food. And I think Wendell Berry said it beautifully. He's a poet and a farmer.
Amazing man.
He said, we have a health system that pays no attention to food and a food system that pays no attention to health. We need to fix that.
So you've referred a couple times to the connection between what we eat and cancer rates. Can you be a lot more precise
absolutely,
about
absolutely,
that?
yeah. So the data is really clear.
You want to scare people into eating better. Cancer is a good way to do it.
Well, cancer is on the rise, and we've gotten.
Just can't get over that. I thought we were going to defeat it with our war on cancer.
Yeah, well, that was Nixon. He wanted to, but the problem is we're barking up the wrong tree. And if you look, there's a real clear data on two drivers of cancer. One is food, and particularly sugar and starch. And two is environmental toxins, it's carcinogens, which are ubiquitous. We're exposed to toxins everywhere, and we can reduce those. But the food part is really interesting because when you look at the growth of cancer cells, they feed on sugar. There's a whole metabolic theory of cancer where if you use a ketogenic diet, and this is work being done at Columbia and by Sid Mukherjee and others, ketogenic diets as a treatment for cancer to actually shut down the cancer cells because they can only feed on sugar. We are like a hybrid engine. We can go electric or we can go gas. We can go carbs. We can go fat. Cancer only goes sugar. So you start the sugar and you kill the cancer. So the amount of sugar and flour eating is about 152 pounds of sugar per person per year and 133 pounds of flour. That's a lot. That's almost 3/4 of a pound a day of sugar and flour for every American. And what that does is it fuels the cancer cells. And so pancreatic cancer, colon cancer, breast cancer, uterine cancer, prostate cancer, even some lung cancers, and the data is documented, go up with insulin resistance, go up with obesity, and go up with diabetes and metabolic dysfunction. 93% of Americans, Tucker, are metabolically broken. This is extraordinary from the American Journal of Cardiology. And what this means is that we're somewhere on the degree of what I call diabesity. Diabesity is pre-diabetes to type 2 diabetes. And we cut off at pre-diabetes, but that's, 1 in 2 Americans has pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes. That's bad enough. 38% of teenage boys. I mean, when I graduated medical school, there was no type 2 diabetes. There was no type 1 diabetes. It was juvenile diabetes, which is an autoimmune disease, or adult onset diabetes, which is a foodborne disease. And so now we've changed the names to protect the guilty. And so now we see kids.
Really?
Yeah.
The names were changed to mask the cause of type 2.
Because kids were getting it. So how do we call it juvenile diabetes if kids are getting type 2 diabetes as young as 2 or 3 years old? It's not their fault. They're being fed, soda. And I once was working in an urgent care in California in an underserved community, and this woman comes in with back pain. She's got a baby in her baby carriage, and he's drinking this brown liquid. And I'm like, what is this? 7 months old. I'm like, what is that? She says, Coca-Cola. I'm like, why are you giving baby Coca-Cola? She said, he likes it. This is what's happening. And so we're turning our whole society into this metabolically broken society. And this is the driver of all the disease we're seeing: cancer, heart disease, diabetes, dementia. They're calling Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes because of how it's connected to sugar and insulin resistance. I co-founded a company called Function Health, which allows people to get insights into their own biology. And what we're finding, Tucker, is that 96% of the people we're testing have metabolic dysfunction. 96%, yeah.
So how do you get insight into your own biology? What does that mean?
So basically, the healthcare system is broken, and I believe that I could work for another 50 years, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe with this new administration, we'll leapfrog and things will change, which I'm very hopeful for. But I created a company with a number of other co-founders called Function Health that allows you easy access to your own blood test. It is simple, 5 minutes to sign up, 15 minutes to go into a Quest lab to get your labs drawn. You get over 110 biomarkers or lab tests that gives you insight into everything that's going on in your body that you're not being checked for at your regular doctor's office. You get 5 times more diagnostics. You look at your hormones, your metabolic health, your cardiovascular health, your nutritional health. Your immune health. We've seen 46% of Americans have some degree of autoimmunity, which is crazy. It's one of the biggest cost drivers, whether it's thyroid autoimmunity or other autoimmunity or pre-autoimmunity. We're seeing 67% have nutritional deficiencies. And these are the lab reference ranges that are Quest. These are not what I would think at optimal. So vitamin D, for example, should be over 50. 45, 50. The reference range is 30. But still, we've got a huge amount of people deficient at that level. And when you're under 30, your risk of getting sick and dying of COVID is 70% higher. If your vitamin D is over 50, your risk of death is 0 compared to looking at these.
Because ask you a dumb question.
No dumb question.
So a basic question. So you get blood, your company does this.
Yeah.
Maybe others do it, but you get a blood test.
Yeah.
You get all these markers, all these measurements of what's in your blood. How do you know what they mean?
Well, that's a great question. So we really used the technology to help us build a database of the most up-to-date scientific information informed by all the scientific literature. And you have a clear description of what every biomarker means. So if your insulin or blood sugar or your cholesterol particles are abnormal or you have positive autoimmune antibodies, we tell you what it means, why it happens, what the root causes are, not necessarily just what traditional medicine things, but what the new science thinks around root causes. We give you all the self-care things you can do yourself to optimize your health. So you can upgrade your biology with the insights from scientific literature, from knowledge experts. We've brought in the top scientists and doctors to help inform the content. So it's like having 1,000 doctors in your pocket. Remember the iPod was 1,000 songs in your pocket?
Yeah.
This is 1,000 doctors in your pocket. And it gives you the ability to do self-care. And like I said, diabetes isn't cured in the doctor's office. It's cured in the kitchen. And that's really what most chronic diseases can be fixed. And I see this over and over. After doing it for 30 years, I've written almost 20 books. And what I see is when people follow the guidance without having to go to the healthcare system, they can correct these things and they can fix these things.
Really?
Yes. It's quite amazing, Tucker.
And by these things, diabetes famously.
Reversible, heart disease reversible, Alzheimer's. Now, Richard Isaacson has done amazing work showing how we can reverse Alzheimer's using aggressive lifestyle interventions. But
what?
Yes. This is incredible data.
I just want to speak up as a non-doctor. We know for a fact that Alzheimer's is incurable. Nothing can make it better.
Well, that's actually not true.
I know, but I've been told that a lot.
Yeah,
so I'm just
of course, because we've spent. This is a great example. We've spent about $2 billion in over 400 studies trying to find drugs for Alzheimer's, and nothing has worked. The drugs that are approved are extremely expensive, have marginal benefit, a lot of side effects, and cost a huge amount of money, and may delay your entry into a nursing home by 2 or 3 months. That's a win. That's not very good. Now, there's a couple of trials that have been done, the FINGER trial out in Europe and the POINTER trial, which is emerging, that showed aggressive lifestyle intervention, diet, exercise, managing stress, sleep, optimizing all your risk factors, was able to not just slow the progression of Alzheimer's and dementia, but to reverse it. This is published data. This is not my opinion. Richard Isaacson also has published this data And
so
and now using biomarkers, and we can actually test with function. Soon we'll be adding biomarkers for Alzheimer's. So now there's blood tests for Alzheimer's. So you don't have to wait until you forget your keys. And also for cancer, you're asking about cancer. We do a multi-cancer.
Wait, at what age is Alzheimer's detectable in a blood test?
That's a great question. So on imaging, which is very expensive and difficult, and not
brain imaging.
Yeah, brain imaging. You can see the changes up to 30 years before you get Alzheimer's as a symptom. With blood tests, it's not as far as that. We're still figuring out, what those times are. But you can see these proteins start to develop in the blood that indicate there's something happening, and you can then intervene early. And the thing about Alzheimer's is that if you intervene early, you can have an incredible benefit to help slow the progression and delay it and actually reverse it. And I've seen this in my patients. I wrote a book about this, the Ultramind Solution, 15 years ago. Dale Bredesen's written a book called The End of Alzheimer's, and documenting that we have to get to the root causes. And
is NIH on this?
No, they're not on it. And this is what drives me crazy.
I don't understand.
So that's what I'm saying. We spend so much money. We've gotten really no results.
Because I don't think you're a crackpot. But here you are sitting on camera saying, no, Alzheimer's is reversible.
Yeah.
Like that. Talk about a headline.
Yeah.
Why isn't that in the New York Times?
Good freaking question.
No, I'm serious though.
Good freaking question.
So either you're crazy or they're dishonest.
Yeah, I think it's a medical paradigm shift. Think is most doctors are in a world is flat world. They don't understand that the world is round. We've shifted a paradigm scientifically from a disease-based diagnostic system to understanding the body as an integrated ecosystem. And so the work of people like Leroy Hood from the Institute for Systems Biology, his Phenome Project, is mapping out how our understanding of disease is completely wrong. It's based on labeling people according to symptoms and where it is in their body, rather than on mechanisms and causes. So I wrote a book called Young Forever, which is about longevity. We talked about it, I think, last time I was on your show. And in the book, I talk about the scientists who come up with this model of what are the root causes of aging. Because we think aging is it's going to happen, inevitable. We're going to get sick, we're going to get older, we're going to get frail, we're going to get weak. And they've identified the underlying biology behind that. So if we cured heart disease and cancer from the face of the planet, we might extend life 5 to 7 years. You can get the same thing with meaning and purpose or playing tennis. But if you actually drill with the hallmarks of aging, the things that really go wrong, inflammation, mitochondrial injury, nutrition, you can and your microbiome, all the things that underlie disease, you could extend life by 30 or 40 years, which means living to 120, which is a crazy notion, right? So we now understand biology in a very different way than we did before, and it hasn't translated into the clinic. And so why I co-founded Function Health with my co-founders was to help accelerate this gap, to kind of leapfrog over this ossified system. But we need to change.
But it's just kind of crazy what you're saying. If you take 3 steps back, it's like the whole point of medicine, I presumed, was to extend and improve life.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Keep you from dying.
Yeah, doctors
make you
are
healthier,
exactly.
make you happier.
Yeah.
And so if there is science that shows that that's possible and everyone's ignoring it, then I'm trying not to use profanity, but like, what is that?
Yeah, well, it's a good question, because we have a illness, medical, industrial, food, ag complex that profits off of people being sick.
But so you write a book saying, or someone else, several doctors write books saying, I can show that Alzheimer's is reversible.
Yeah.
And what is every other doctor in America? Because they just don't read the book. They haven't heard of it. Like, what?
It's like,
that's kind of a provocative thesis. Because I think of Alzheimer's as like AIDS in 1986. Like, it's the worst thing.
It's big.
And there's nothing you can do about it.
No, it's. Do
you remember that with AIDS?
100%. It's scary as hell. And
the scariest. Yeah.
And I can tell you that this is not my opinion. I was at Cleveland Clinic. I worked with Marwan Sabah when he was there. He was the head of the Dementia Research Center. He understood this. He understood these mechanisms, these biology, the science is there. But there's no funding for it, because what are we talking about, Tucker? We're talking about providing lifestyle interventions that they're intensive, that people need support. They need to change their diet. They need to exercise. They need to optimize their sleep. They need to manage stress. They need to take the right nutritional supplements. They need to modify their risk factors aggressively. This requires a very different reimbursement system. We don't have evidence-based medicine, Tucker. We have reimbursement-based medicine. Doctors do what they get paid to do, not what the right thing is. The right treatment for diabetes is not more drugs or Ozempic. The right treatment is diet.
So it sounds like doctors aren't really in control.
I mean, they're doing the best they can.
But they're responding to forces bigger than themselves.
Yeah, medical education is a great example. Like, doctors graduating, in the 50s or 40s, we're dealing with infectious disease and acute care medicine, and we have the best acute care medicine system in the world. Bar none. If you have an acute infection, if you have sepsis, if you need ICU,
you're in a car crash.
You're in a car crash. damn right I'm going to the hospital. But that system doesn't work for chronic illness. And that's what we're facing now. And so the 80% of the conditions that doctors are seeing are chronic diseases for which drugs are not the right therapy most of the time. They can be helpful as adjuncts, but the fundamental drivers of our chronic disease epidemic is the food we're eating and also environmental toxins that are adding to that. And when you add those two things together, it explains most of the chronic disease epidemic.
It's just, I mean, a lot of smart people, you included, you're definitely one of the earliest, but are saying varieties of what you're saying now. So, I mean, it was, 30 years ago or so that the Congress hauled the heads of the tobacco companies, Reynolds and Philip Morris and Laura Lard, and humiliated them on camera. And you knew you were hurting people, you did it anyway.
That's right.
Is that going to happen with Nabisco anytime soon?
I mean, there are class action lawsuits that are being now raised around these companies to look at holding them accountable for what they're doing. And they know, and there's been FOIA requests and information requests that I actually wrote about in my book that show their nefarious behavior, for example, targeting minorities and targeting lower income people to focus on buying more junk food.
Well, the food stamp program is the perfect example of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy, Tucker, when you think about it. When the American taxpayer is paying through the nose for everything all the way along, the companies are privatizing profits and we're socializing the costs. So we basically fund the growth of commodity crops with $20 billion of subsidies in crop insurance for corn, wheat, and soy to the farmers, which puts them in a really tight bond because they can't change their system without support to changing to a more regenerative system that they're going to make more money, they're going to grow better food, they're going to have better resuscitation of their rural economies, and not hopefully commit suicide at the rate they're doing. We pay for that, and then we pay for those foods for our SNAP program. So we have about $125 billion in SNAP, which is our food stamp program. It's supplemental nutrition assistance, but there's no N in there. There's just food security, which means calories. So when you get your EBT benefits in the beginning of the month, these food companies know to advertise in the bodega. So they'll get your 2-liter bottle of Coke with your EBT, and they put these giant ads in there, and they know exactly when they're getting their cards. So we basically fund. So
you can buy Coca-Cola.
75% of the food bought on SNAP is junk food. 10% is soda. So you think about $12 billion on soda the Americans paying.
Why would soda be federal? Why would, if we're giving out nutritional assistance to the poor, why would we pay for soda?
What an obvious question, Tucker. Yeah.
But that's just crazy.
It's crazy. And we know
if you wanted to hurt the poor, you would do that.
I mean, we know beyond a doubt, and we can talk about ultra processed food. There's arguments this and that way and this way, but the food industry will say, "Oh, it's we're going to take away people's choice. We're going to take away convenience. We're going to take away affordability. We're going to make food less safe if we don't ultra processed food." These are their talking points. It's all about calories. It's not moderation. So you can have, soda as part of your diet as long as you don't exceed your calories. It's basically your fault that you're fat, so you fix it. That's the messaging, right? It's the messaging from every food industry sort of message from every professional association, message from the medical but
that doesn't mean that we have to pay for it. Why are we paying for it?
Well, that's it. So we pay for probably 30 billion or more servings of soda for the poor every year, and then we pay for
taxpayers are sending all this money to Coca-Cola.
The biggest profit center in America for Coca-Cola is 20% of their profits is SNAP, food stamps. Walmart gets, I don't know, something like 40 billion of that food stamp bill. I mean, it's crazy, and we pay on the other.
Are those numbers real?
Yeah, I can get you the Walmart numbers, but yeah, it's really high, and then we have
that's shocking
to pay for Medicare and Medicaid on the back end when people get sick from those foods. And then we pay all the other
costs. So you
costs.
pay for the Coca-Cola and the Ozempic.
Yeah. I mean, listen, the price we pay at the checkout.
Pop-Tarts and the insulin.
I mean, that's right. The price you pay at the checkout counter is not the true cost of food. The true cost of food, the Rockefeller Foundation report, is for every dollar you spend on food, there's $3 in collateral damage.
Yeah.
To health.
Pay for the crack and the rehab.
Yeah, exactly. It's totally nuts.
Pay for the hookers and the
we
divorce.
Could fix this.
It's
We could fix this. And Andy Harris, who's a congressman, wanted to do a simple pilot study, just a pilot study to see what would happen if we eliminated soda from food stamp benefits in a couple of locations, just to monitor the impact on the health of those people. And he couldn't get it through as a pilot, not to change the entire USC policy, just as a pilot study. So imagine how anti-science this is. This is truly anti-science.
So it's just, I really believe in naming and shaming. It works.
Yeah.
Just call people out,
Yeah.
bring some sunlight in and let them defend it.
Exactly.
So I'd love to know who's behind that. And by the way, I'm not saying you shouldn't be allowed to buy Coca-Cola. I'm saying I don't want to pay for it.
Right.
That's fair, isn't it?
100%. I mean, the government of the United States should not be funding the chronic disease epidemic, which they currently are. They are either by policies that were put in, that were innocent, or by
But it's so perfect. It's like when I learned that we were funding ISIS in Syria, I was like, that's kind of perfect, actually. Like both sides are taking American money.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy. But we have the opportunity to change that. For example, WIC, which is Women, Infants, and Children's Food Program, is based on only allowing people to buy food that's going to be healthy for the mother and child. Why not apply that to WIC? Why not school standards being changed so that actually kids can have healthy food?
Well, I know that I think WIC is like the center of profit for the formula makers, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's true. That's another problem. But yeah, for example, in Chile, they outlawed formula marketing for kids. They outlawed advertising to kids. They got rid of all the junk food in schools. They put it in front of package labeling.
Why would the federal taxpayers, me included, you included, be paying for baby formula? Why would we be encouraging formula over breast milk?
Well, it's a huge industry. I mean, there's a group from the WHO has put together some initial papers, and it's coming out with a report next year about the commercial determinants of health, which is how multinational and transnational corporations in food and ag and alcohol, tobacco are essentially driving our chronic disease epidemic, and they're privatizing the profits, subverting public health, and socializing the costs. And the governments are the ones who are struggling with this. And so there are many other countries.
But the governments are paying for it.
Their governments are paying for it. And you look at the healthiest countries, they're the ones like Japan and Singapore and Spain and Italy. They actually have policies that are protecting their citizens, that are educating them about food, that are not allowing the same.
Or how about just don't pay for it? I mean, we could start there.
So Christmas is coming and winter is coming. And that's the perfect combination for Cozy Earth. Cozy Earth is a company that makes exactly what it sounds like, products that are close to the earth and that are quite cozy. And you should consider them this Christmas. They have the best sheets available. They're made out of bamboo, believe it or not. And it's hard to believe how great they are until you try them. We have, and they are great. They're a great fit for everybody in your shopping list. What sets them apart? Well, their fabrics are temperature regulating. That means they keep you cool and cozy, or warm and cozy, depending on the temperature. And they have a 10-year warranty. So if anything goes wrong with your sheets, you get free ones. Go to cozyearth.com/Tucker. Use our promo code Tucker for up to 40% off. And if they ask, tell them the Tucker Carlson Show sent you. Everyone here uses those sheets and loves them.
And it does raise some pretty interesting questions. The smartest thing I've heard this year, I think it's a common phrase now, is that the point of the system is its outcome. Mm-hmm. So if you're wondering about motive, look at what the system produces, and that describes the motive.
Yeah.
Right? We don't have to guess.
Yeah.
So if governments are making their citizens more unhealthy, I think we can assume that they want that outcome.
No, they don't. They don't. This has been the frog in boiling water slowly that's hit them so fast. Because, bring all these fast food companies, bring all these American companies in to help us with our food nutrition. Let's get fast food everywhere. It's kind of the Americanization of the world, right? We basically created the worst diet on the planet and exported it to every country in the world.
Oh, I've noticed.
And we see now, even in the developing world, they call it the double burden of disease: chronic disease and infectious disease. So they're dying of diabetes and tuberculosis. They're dying of diabetes and malaria.
I hate to say it, but I've traveled a lot of countries this year, and the best food I had in any country was in a country under such severe U.S. sanctions that no U.S. companies could operate. I'm not going to name the country, but I'm just saying, I don't want to be too controversial.
Yeah.
And it makes me sad.
Controversial, Tucker?
Well, it makes me. I'm.
You always color in the lines.
I think of myself as a truly loyal American. I'm all in on America. I'm never leaving. But to go to a country whose food is amazing, best I've ever had in my whole life.
Yeah.
And it also happens that country has no American food of any kind because it's not allowed.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a connection.
Yeah. So exactly, and so these countries have been unwittingly participating in what they thought was growth and economic development but what it's done is sicken their populations. And so now there are a lot of these countries are standing up. Like the UK just banned advertising of junk food. France has clear labeling on their front of package to make it really clear what you're eating. Chile in South America, you go there and there's big just warning signs on the front of labels. They've done all these policies that have actually been studied and worked. So we have cover in the United States. Why should we be allowing things in the United States that we don't? These other countries have determined aren't safe.
Well, at least paying for it. Let's just stop paying for it. People are into some weird self-destructive behavior. I'm not interested in rooting it out or showing up at your house, making sure you're not doing it.
No. People should be
definitely don't want to pay for it.
No,
Why should I have to pay?
Well, people should be informed, and we should be not having to pay for it.
Yes.
Yeah. And, government procurement, $166 billion the government spends on food for military, for correctional facility, for schools, for everything. When you look at the fat bill, do you know how much that could change the food system if we said, based on these set of nutritional principles, which are, I think, well accepted in the nutritional science community of being what is food. If we just followed that and didn't pay for all the junk food and the ultra-processed food, we just took that out, it would change the food system in America, because all the industry would change. If you take $166 billion out of the food economy and say we're only buying healthy food from farmers who produce healthy food, it's going to change everything from field to fork. These are simple things that the government can do that's easy. And
because they control it. So people I've known a lot of people go to prison more now than ever, and they get fat in prison. A lot of them.
Oh yeah.
Is that? I assume that's because the food is fat.
Of course. I mean, in prisons, they did another study I mentioned about the juvenile detention centers. They swapped out prisoners' food for healthy food. And they found there was a 56% reduction in violent crime in the prisons and an 80% reduction if they added a multivitamin. So there's so much nutritional deficiencies. In countries like Japan, they put people on a super healthy diet in prison and all their violent behavior goes down. It's pretty amazing.
Really?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, their diet's totally different. They put on like a macrobiotic, like very kind of like healthy diet that gets them completely reset. And we know the mental health crisis also.
Why don't we do that since it's a captive population?
We can. I mean, the problem is this is a very, I don't want to sound conspiratorial, but I'm telling you there is a very loose organization of industries that are working together to keep the system status quo. They don't want changes in our agricultural subsidies. They don't want changes in farming practices. They don't want changes in how we fund SNAP. They don't want changes in how we reimburse healthcare. They don't want changes in our food labeling. They don't want changes in ingredients that are in our food. This is stuff that's so entrenched that it's essential for their profits and their success.
But I mean, prisons, if you think about it, have been used as, because it is captive, the population of a prison, they've been used as testing populations for syphilis and vaccines and LSD and all kinds of horrible shit. Yeah. And you feel so sorry for the men who had to endure that. Yeah. Why not use prisons?
Well, I'm not sure the LSD was bad for them, but
Whitey Bulger was at Alcatraz. Whitey Bulger, the head of the Winter Hill gang in Boston, a mass murderer, and he got dosed really hard with LSD at Alcatraz in the early 60s and wound up effectively a serial killer, and his brother didn't, and wound up the most powerful politician in Massachusetts.
That's incredible.
So I'm just saying,
maybe flip them.
But anyway, here's the point. Why not use prisons as a kind of federal prisons as a national test for the outcome of the diet you're suggesting?
Yeah, you could do that. I mean, there were studies that were done in mental institutions years ago, but there's ethics, and so informed consent. Yeah,
not feeding people Oreos is unethical. Like what?
Yeah. Well, I think you're right, Tucker. I mean, the ethical considerations are really around informed consent in medicine.
We gave them syphilis.
You can't.
Okay, it's okay to take the Oreos away.
Now there's rules about this.
No, but I'm just saying, like.
But we could get informed consent. We could ask
pay them 15 cents an hour to work. That's right. They're prisoners. They can't vote. They can't own firearms. They can't see their wives. Like, everything about it is horrible. Why wouldn't you use the opportunity to improve their health?
I 100% agree. I think we need to do that at every sector of society where the government has a hand. School lunches, the military, all our federal food programs. These are easy interventions, but the food industry blocks it by huge lobbying efforts in Washington. In my nonprofit Food Fix campaign, which is really about educating and advocating for policy change to really improve the health of Americans, we've met with over 150 senators and congressmen, both sides of the aisle, and everybody seems to get this issue, and they're not hearing about it, and they're starting to hear about it because people like me are talking about it. But I'm just one guy. I have a little nonprofit. I'm not funded by industry. I don't have any conflicts of interest, and I'm just trying to,
What are the big lobbies? Everyone says the big food lobby. What companies is that?
You've got the American Beverage Association, you've got, all the, the pharmaceutical lobby groups, you've got all the ag lobby groups. I mean, collectively, they're the biggest group of lobbyists in Washington, exceeding all the other lobbying. And they're very powerful, and they control a lot of what happens in Washington. I detailed a lot of this in my book, Food Fix, where congressmen are funded by Coca-Cola or these big companies, and they fund both sides. They fund everybody.
Of course they do.
And so they've got a lot of it locked up, and they're miseducating. It's the misinformation and miseducation of our policymakers and government officials, because they're only hearing one side of the story. They come in with their briefing books, with their scientific papers, with their justification, with the regulations written, with the legislation written, and they literally give it to them. I've been in congressmen and senators' offices. This is amazing, Mark. Could you write the legislation for me? I'm like, what? I don't know how to do that. I mean, I have people on my team who probably can do that, but it's like it was sort of a startling kind of revelation that people in Congress need help, and they need guidance, they need direction,
and they're overwhelmed,
and they're overwhelmed, and they're good people, and they want to do the right thing, and they're not hearing the other side of the story. And so when you lay it out for them, they're like, that was with Senator Boozman from Arkansas. He's a great guy. And he's like, yeah, I'm seeing the changes in my rural community. I'm seeing what's happening on the farms. I'm seeing the degradation of these, and I'm seeing the processed food. I'm seeing what it affects my population, and he gets it. And he wouldn't let me, I was off for 45 minutes. Usually get like a senator pops in, hi, 5 minutes, they're in and out. But it was an incredible conversation. I've seen this with Randy Fenstra, who's really interested in regenerative agriculture. I've seen this, on the Democratic side with people like Cory Booker and Richard Neal and James McGovern, who are trying to advocate for food policies. So Roger Marshall and Cassidy, both doctors, fully in on this stuff. So there's so many allies in Congress on both sides of the aisle that are sort of sick and tired of how this thing is going and realize we can't continue to do what we're doing. And I think, Tucker, we have a historic opportunity with Trump and Bobby Kennedy. And Dr. Oz now is the head of the CMS, and other people. I think hopefully Casey Means will be Surgeon General.
I hope so.
I think we can have a shift in the thinking and educate America, just like we did with smoking, and we can win.
It's just so funny that whatever, life is irony, everything is irony, but the Big Mac president is ushering in. It's just crazy. Oh no, I'm serious. Of all people,
but it makes sense, right?
It's incredible.
Johnson was one of the biggest bigots. He signed the Civil Rights Act.
That's fair.
Reagan was the most staunch anti-communist. He's the one who ended the Cold War. So there's a historical.
No,
fact.
that's very deep. What you're saying is deep. No, that is the way life is. Right. Actually, it's the opposite of what you expect.
Yeah.
And I've talked to Trump about it, and he means it. I would say Bobby Kennedy is one of the nominees he's proudest of. Yeah. He hasn't backed down at all. I think Bobby's going to get confirmed. I want to ask you about the thing for which Bobby is most famous, but I don't want to say the word because YouTube will monetize this. You're not even allowed, even now.
Yeah.
YouTube, biggest company, most powerful company in the world, Google, has an AI program that will literally knock out your video if you use the V word.
Yeah.
So let's call it the shot.
The V word,
if you don't mind.
The V word,
the V word, not the good V word, the bad V word. So Bobby Kennedy became infamous 15 or 20 years ago when he wrote a piece in Rolling Stone suggesting that, he just got exiled from America basically for suggesting that the shot might cause really bad outcomes, health outcomes in children.
Yep.
I never hear anybody bring that up anymore. Have we accepted that there may be truth in that?
Well, listen, I think, we get sort of religion around certain topics in medicine, and I don't understand this. Medicine is supposed to be about science.
Yes,
it's about,
that's what I thought.
About asking questions.
Yeah.
And to say a subject is settled and we need no more science doesn't make any sense. Like aspirin's a great example. We thought aspirin was the greatest thing on the planet Earth, that everybody should get an aspirin to prevent a heart attack. But as we start to look at the data very carefully, we saw that, actually it increases the risk of certain problems like brain hemorrhage and gastrointestinal bleeding and death. And 30,000 people die every year from taking aspirin for prevention of heart attacks.
What?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
Right. So
you're supposed to take a baby aspirin every day.
Well, that's right. But it causes bleeding. It thins your blood. That's why it's good for preventing heart attacks, but it also can make you have a brain hemorrhage or, a gut bleed. And so now the guidelines have been revised, and it's not recommended for everybody, only certain high-risk populations, right? And yet we change our mind based on the data. We look at the science. We update our data. The V word is, listen, I'm just going to say it. I think vaccines are one of the greatest advances in medicine in history. They have eradicated many serious diseases, polio, smallpox, I mean, I was in Haiti during the earthquake, and I was working at the General Hospital there, and there was a guy with tetanus, and I'd never seen a full-blown case of tetanus before. It was one of the worst things I'd ever seen.
What is it? I don't know.
Tetanus is when you step on a rusty nail.
Right, lockjaw, they used to call it.
Lockjaw, but you like basically go into total paralysis. Like your body's it's like one big giant spasm, and you can't get out of it. And you like basically have to give them IVs and oxygen and hope they survive. And there's tetanus antitoxin, but it was the worst thing I'd ever seen. So vaccines have a role, and the problem is that
a tetanus shot is a vaccine.
Yeah, tetanus shot's a vaccine.
I didn't know
that. Yeah, polio is a vaccine.
Of course, well, famously.
Yeah,
but a tetanus shot is a vaccine.
Yeah, it's a vaccine. You're supposed to get every 10 years. Yeah, and diphtheria. So there's some really good things we've done in medicine to reduce a lot of the childhood illnesses and childhood deaths.
Yes.
Measles. This is vaccines aren't a problem. The problem is that we need to study long-term safety and efficacy of these drugs like any other drug. One of the problems with medicine is and I think this was a huge failure during COVID, and I think Bobby was right about this. We did not actually give the American public the benefit of the doubt that they were smart enough to understand the nuances around this treatment. So they said, vaccines are safe, they're effective. Well, not really. Like any drug, it's sort of safe and it can be effective, right? Aspirin is effective for certain things, but it also has side effects, right? And so vaccines work to prevent the mortality rates and reduce death rates and reduce the severity of infection, but it didn't prevent infection. And that was very clearly early on. And there's this concept called sterile immunity versus disease immunity. Sterile immunity is you get a measles shot when you're a kid, you never need it again. You're sterile, you're never going to get measles. The flu vaccine, you have to get every year because you basically don't get permanent immunity. You get sort of a reduction in the risk of disease. That's what the COVID vaccine was. So it reduced the risk, but it didn't prevent you getting it, didn't prevent transmission. And it also has side effects. And we were pushing on young kids, and now the data is really clear. It causes increased myocarditis, heart inflammation. So what we need is just good science. And I think this is all Bobby's asking for. He's not anti-vaccine. He's been vaccinated. I've been vaccinated. We vaccinate our kids. I think it's propaganda that say he's an anti-vaxxer. That's really just a way of dismissing him. But I think we have to understand that we just need to do good science. And that's all he's asking for. He recently came out and said he's not taking vaccines. He's pro-vaccines. He just wants good science. And I think that's what we need around everything. I mean, and it's whether it's Alzheimer's or whether it's diabetes or whether it's whatever it is, we're studying the wrong things.
Now, we've told you before about a staff favorite here at TCN, the 8 Sleep Pod. What is it? It's a high-tech mattress that we talk about over lunch here, our mattresses, because this one is excellent. It's high-tech. It's a cover. It goes right over your existing bed. Well, this Christmas, you can get it for the best price of the year, up to $600 off. The 8 Sleep Pod works by adjusting the temperature, warmer or cooler, depending on your preference, and it maintains an ideal sleeping network all night long. You might not know this, but through different phases of sleep, every night your body's needs change. Sometimes you want it warmer, sometimes colder. That's why you throw the sheets off. That's why you pull them around you at other parts of the night. You don't have to do that anymore with 8 Sleep because it automatically keeps things exactly where you want them throughout your entire night's sleep, what's called the sleep cycle. And it's been studied. It's clinically proven to increase quality sleep time every night. That improves your recovery time from physical exertion, makes you a little sharper, makes your health better. It learns and adapts to your sleep patterns over time, and it automatically adjusts temperatures throughout the night through each phase of your sleep. And it does this independently for up to 2 people in a bed. So each person can have a tailor-made sleep. It really helps. People here absolutely love it. 8 Sleep. Go to 8sleep.com/Tucker. Use the promo code Tucker to get up to $600 off the Pod 4 Ultra. You can try with no obligation for 30 days. If you don't like it, just send it back. That's 8sleep.com/Tucker. Better sleep, truly.
Why do you think it became verboten to ask any questions about this one category of medicine?
That's a very good question. I don't know the answer to that.
There was a religious fervor that scared me. I didn't understand.
Yeah.
I have exactly the same view that you just articulated on the subject. I'm not a zealot either way.
Yeah.
But the zealotry was 100% on the other side, and it was really scary. It ended friendships. It divided families.
Yeah,
it's like I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
What was that?
I think as a public health effort. I understand the public health mission, which is to sort of work on the health of the entire population. And so you're willing to kind of simplify things and put out messaging that may not be completely scientific in order to get people to do stuff, right? Which is what happened during COVID.
Oh, you lie to manipulate people.
Well, that, yeah.
You can't do that. That's
no, but
immoral.
I think
lying is
people
wrong, period.
We need informed consent. You listen, when you prescribe a drug as a doctor, you're supposed to say, if I give you this drug, here's the benefits and here's the risks. It's really clear we're supposed to do that in medicine. It's called informed consent.
To do that.
Yeah, and we should have informed consent so people understand, here's the benefit, here's the risk, and you can decide for yourself.
But why would, of course, everything became, in the politically charged year of 2020 election year, became super partisan. Okay, so there's that.
Yeah.
But it was deeper than that, because Trump was out there. He was pro-vaccine.
Yeah.
And then the Biden people, of course, are pro-vaccine. But the media became like, I've never seen that level of intolerance. Like anybody who asked any question was not just wrong or misinformed, but evil and deserving of death. As a doctor, is that the view of doctors? Like anyone who questions this should die? What is that?
It's quite astounding, Tucker. It's one of those areas in medicine where it's become a religion and you can't question it.
But why? Was that the case when you were in medical school?
Not really. Like I don't understand what happened. I think there was a sense that we're being not given this whole story and the whole truth, and I think this is true. And I think most people don't know. Well,
whenever they attack you for asking questions, then you can be certain you're not getting the whole story.
Absolutely. And and people have attacked me. There's this group called the American Council on Science and Health, which has gone after me, and they're basically funded by Monsanto and pesticide companies and pharma and the tobacco companies and the fast food companies. And so they I'm pretty vocal about
sound
this.
Like a fun group.
Yeah, and they sound great, and this is one of their strategies. So the way in which the food, and you asked how this has happened, it's not by accident. So the food industry and the agri industry have deliberately set up a series of actions and strategies across all sectors of society to take over the narrative. One, they fund most of the research. So there's 12 times as much research, quote, on nutrition from food industry. In other words, the American Beverage Association does a study on artificial sweeteners. They find they're fine, and they do a study on soda. They find it doesn't cause obesity, right? That's kind of garbage science. And there's 8 to 50 times more likely to show a benefit for their product if they're funding it. So they take over the research infrastructure. They take over the professional associations. The American Heart Association receives $192 million a year from pharma and food. American Diabetes Association, Academy of Nutrition Dietetics, all the major professional associations, which we think are independent, giving us independent advice, are funded and co-opted by these. And it's astounding.
What about the autism groups? Because I always wondered, there's been this massive increase in autism. I don't know what's causing it. It's not genetic. No. That's not true. It's not because we broadened the classification of autism. That's just
it's not better standard detection. It's 1,000%.
Right. So, and it's a life-ending crisis.
It went from 1 in 2,500 to 1 in 26 kids, 1 in 39 kids.
Of course, we all know people who have autistic children, and it's really a tragedy. So, there are all these autism groups, and they're incredibly pompous and self-righteous.
Yeah.
But all of them have sort of shot down the idea that we should ask any questions about where this comes from.
Well, not all of them. There's some are asking.
The big ones have.
Yeah, of course.
I know someone who worked at one. I was like, what's causing this? Shut up!
That's right.
It's like you work at an autism group. Right. Why aren't you interested?
Exactly.
Who's funding them? Do you know? We should take a close look.
I don't know, but there's autism groups, and then they fund not only professional associations, not only they fund nutrition research, but they obviously also create these front groups like the American Council on Science and Health and Crop Life and all these nice sounding things.
American Council on Science and Health sounds very legitimate.
It sounds legitimate, and you look at these guys. Half these guys were in jail.
Are you against science and health?
No, but one of these guys was in jail for Medicare fraud for $8 million. You look at these guys; they're criminals.
Well, he knows a lot about science and health.
Yeah, exactly. And then
serious?
I'm serious. So they fund social groups. So get this, Tucker. They fund the NAACP and the Hispanic Federation.
Oh, I'm aware of this.
And I was with
Al Sharpton. That's where he got his suits taken.
That's right. And I was with Bernice King in Washington, in Atlanta. And
nice woman. Yeah.
We were going to show the movie Fed Up, which was about childhood obesity and how our sugar industry was causing this and our food industry was causing this. And she said, nonviolence is just not nonviolence to others, but it's nonviolence to yourself. And I think this is important. And I want to show this film in the King Center. So I said, great. And so a few days later, she called me back and said, Mark, can't do it. I said, why? Coca-Cola funds the King Center.
Oh, and obesity is not a problem in the black community.
You know, if you look at
evil,
African Americans in the 60s, they were healthier than white Americans. If you look at that movie Amazing Grace with Aretha Franklin,
oh, I know.
It's a great movie. She was thin, and every black person in that congregation in Oakland in 1970 was thin. And now 85% of African American women are overweight.
It was LA, I think, not Oakland.
Really? Was it LA? Okay.
Where she recorded the gospel album?
I think it was the Amazing Grace. I don't remember. It was a great documentary.
Oh, it's the most incredible album too.
So they fund social groups to help oppose things that they don't want, like soda taxes, or they fund like the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, which is one of the premier children's hospitals in the world. CHOP was going to actually come out in favor of a soda tax, but Coca-Cola gave them $10 million, and they pulled back. This is the kind of stuff they do. So they fund science. They co-op professional associations. They fund the social groups. They create front groups, and they're huge lobbyists. And so they're very deliberate in how they do this. In fact, it was illegal. They got a huge lawsuit against them from Secretary of the Attorney General of Washington State because they colluded. A lot of the food industry groups colluded to fight against GMO labeling, which they wanted to do in Washington. Now, America and Syria are the only countries that don't allow GMO labeling. It's a pretty good company.
Syria's got bigger problems.
China and Russia, are transparent about this, and they're not known for their transparency.
They're not allowed in Russia.
Right.
Yeah.
And so basically, they funded this campaign for a ballot initiative to defeat the GMO labeling, and they won, but they did it illegally, and they spent huge amounts of money doing it, and they were then fined and had the biggest fine ever, which was trivial for them. It was like, I don't know, $18 million or something that they had to pay, but it was trivial. But they got a big slap on the wrist for doing this, but they won. Same thing in California when Jerry Brown was governor, and he's Governor Moonbeam. I mean, he's as left as you can get, and there were soda taxes being passed all around California, and the soda industry got together, the American Beverage Association. They said, we're going to create a ballot measure that's going to require 2/3 majority for every vote in any state or local government for anything. It would basically paralyze the government of California if they pass this ballot measure. And they were funding it with millions of dollars, had nothing to do with food. They said, look, Jerry, we're going to pull this ballot measure, but you've got to put in a permanent ban on soda tax in California. And he did. That's what's going on behind the scenes. That's how this works.
Permanent ban on soda taxes?
In California.
There's no permanent ban on any other kind of taxes. So that's also what bothers me is I do think there should be one standard for everyone in every category because we're all American citizens.
Right.
So nobody should be exempt from taxes.
No.
Very much including college endowments. And nobody should be exempt from lawsuits unless all of us are. And so I don't understand. Like, one of the reasons orthopedic surgeons don't do knee replacements drunk is they can be sued for it.
Oh,
But drug makers, for a certain category of drug, have blanket immunity. Where do I get? Do you have blanket immunity granted by Congress? Because I don't.
I wish. That would be nice. How do we get that?
So I don't. But okay, I don't understand
give me
the thinking.
$20 million. I'll donate. Maybe I can get that.
No,
for
but
you.
like this is absolutely nuts.
It is.
How does one category of product have blanket immunity from law, statutorily blanket immunity, and they're like, well, we provide a vital service. Well, everybody who works thinks he provides a vital service. Like, who doesn't think you think you're providing a vital service? I do.
I mean, you want
I don't get it.
I mean, you want to incentivize innovation. You want to incentivize science. You want to, accelerate things that may be really necessary in ways that, are probably not possible within the normal course of how we develop drugs.
Well, then let's do tort reform.
Right. But
what how about we all benefit from it?
Was vaccines, some of them were not that profitable, and some are very profitable. But what's happened is that in 1980, I think it was 86, the U.S. government indemnified vaccine makers.
Oh, I know.
So that meant that they could make vaccines and never be sued, and they created a vaccine court to deal with vaccine injury, and they paid over $5 billion in vaccine injuries.
So now, the drug companies paid over $5 billion?
No. The U.S. taxpayers paid.
Wait. So you're saying that the drug companies can never be sued, but if they are sued, taxpayers have to pay the damages?
That's right. Federal vaccine court. Yeah. And
so that's the biggest scam I think I've ever heard of, ever.
I mean, in a way, I understood the thinking behind it because, you want to incentivize rapid development of drugs that aren't going to be that profitable, right? But it turns out that many of these drugs are profitable, like rotavirus, which is a new vaccine. And when we were kids, there were like eight shots. Now there's like 72 shots you get. And many countries, for example, don't allow, for example, hepatitis B at birth is a vaccine we're recommending in America. And it's what you get from IV drugs or sex. Now, I don't know any newborns that are doing IV drugs or sex. And if you
probably not a lot.
Probably not a lot. But in many countries, don't actually have it on the vaccine schedule. We do. And so with rotavirus, for example, they profit $100 billion. It's $100 billion profit for them. That's nuts, right?
Do you have any idea why the trial bar, which has always been one of the most powerful lobbies in Washington and definitely the most powerful in the Democratic Party, haven't said anything about this?
I don't know.
So their argument has always been, look, if you want safer goods and services, you have to apply a penalty to people who are negligent.
Yeah.
I mean, that's their argument. It's not a crazy argument, by the way.
No.
And Coca-Cola, by the way, for all its faults, can be sued if they poison you with a can of Diet Coke.
That's right.
So they don't.
Right.
So why wouldn't that? And by the way, if you're saying, well, I can't make enough money selling my product, why don't you convince people to buy it then? Just convince people that it's a good product and they'll probably pay for it.
Yeah.
No?
I understand that. I mean, it wasn't a completely stupid idea, but it's ended up being a bit of a disaster. And I think all we need is better science, good science. And
if you have a government that's like, you must use this product, you've got no choice. We'll punish you if you don't use the product. And then you get injured by the product.
Yeah.
Most people got injured, had no idea they could be injured because nobody told them. They do get injured.
Yeah.
You're told to shut up and just suffer or die in silence. And then you've got no recourse.
Mm-hmm.
And then the people who sold you the product at gunpoint become billionaires. That seems like a very flawed system.
It's a bit messed up. I mean, it's a bit messed up.
Kind of a perfect system for the drug.
But it just sort of underscores the bigger problem in our society, which is that we really have multinational and transnational corporations profiting from creating more sickness. The food companies create illness, the pharma companies pay for the illness, drug treatments, and the whole thing just works for them. But we have to change this, and we can, as a federal government, change the policies, because other countries have done this. They've been successful. They're winning the war on this problem, and we need a focused effort. And I think there's so many things that could be done in this administration.
Okay, so tell us about Bobby Kennedy, who you've, for viewers who haven't followed this for a long time, you've known him for a long time. You wrote a book with him. He's not just like some guy you met at a cocktail party.
No.
You know him really well. You told me at dinner last night you were just staying with him.
Yeah.
Do you want to say where you're staying? Because I thought it was hilarious.
Oh, we were staying at Dr. Oz's house.
Okay. So you got Mark Hyman, Bobby Kennedy. Were the Meanses there too?
Callie was there.
Yeah. Callie Means and Dr. Oz all staying together. So
it was.
So it's a conspiracy of light, I would say. But anyway, you know Bobby really well, personally and professionally. What do you think his strengths are going into this job?
I think he has the right focus and perspective, which is that we have a crisis, which is our chronic disease epidemic. It's been neglected by the scientific community predominantly. It's been neglected by the federal government. It's bankrupting us. It's causing destruction of our environment, of our social structures, of our academic competitive global competitiveness, of our military. And he understands that these needs to be addressed. And so I think that's a huge strength. I think he wants to focus on rooting out corruption, rooting out conflicts of interest in agencies. I think he wants to implement policies that are going to transform the health of America. And we're working on a whole series of different ideas, but I think the NIH needs to be reformed. They should basically fund nutrition research around chronic disease, which they don't. Very small amount of money goes to that.
They still don't.
5%, but it's 80% of the diseases we're seeing. They should have a mandate, for example, that all medical schools and academic institutions that receive federal funding from any source should have a nutrition curriculum, and that it should be mandated. And there's a reason for that, because doctors graduating today, my daughter's in medical school, she's in fourth year medical school, not a single thing on nutrition. I'm like, what did you learn? Well, I learned a bit of amino acids and fatty acids. I mean, what are you going to tell your patient to have for lunch? And so zero education, that could be changed.
Was that true when you were in medical school?
Of course. Yeah. I learned about, kwashiorkor and marasmus and rickets and xerophthalmia, all these rare diseases from vitamin deficiencies in Africa and protein malnutrition.
Berry.
Yeah. Berry and pellagra. I'm like, I never seen any of that. I didn't see any of that. So I think I did see some malnutrition when I was in Haiti, but it was really, really rare. And what we're not doing this. The NIH could do a lot. And then the HHS could fund with Medicare nutrition services in medicine, which it doesn't pay for now. So if you have diabetes or heart disease or diet-caused diseases, very hard to get nutrition services. And we at Cleveland Clinic created a lifestyle change program where we got people to work together to change their behavior and change lifestyle. It was based on the sort of work I did with Rick Warren and Saddleback Church, where we got 15,000 people to lose 250,000 pounds in a year by actually getting healthy together. So really it's about behavior change and also what to do. So they changed what was in the refineries. They got rid of the pancake breakfast, the ice cream socials. They got everybody jogging for Jesus. It was great. And then they lost a lot of weight. Rick lost a ton of weight. They got healthy. And we showed how people doing this in groups actually works. And this could be funded by the federal government.
Well, schools used to do that.
Yeah.
I don't think they do anymore.
No. And so we know actually how to change behavior. We know how to change these chronic diseases with food, and that needs to be funded. So like I said, we don't have evidence-based medicine. We have reimbursement-based medicine. There's a company called Virta that reverses type 2 diabetes in 60% of their patients using a ketogenic diet. They do it with a continuous care online model. They reverse all the biomarkers for heart disease. They get those better. They have about 12% weight loss.
Can you separate this? So they reverse 60% of diagnosed type 2?
Yeah, fairly advanced type 2 diabetes.
Like insulin dependent?
100%. They get 100% off the medication, the main medication for diabetes. They get 90+% off. They save $6,000 per diabetic patient. And if you apply that to the Medicare diabetes population, just doing that alone would save $100 billion a year.
You're not even counting all the amputated limbs and
that's what it was.
The suffering that goes along with it.
Yeah.
So what... roughly when is the average type 2 diabetic diagnosed as such?
Depends. I mean, if you're a Pima Indian, it could be 3 years old. 80% of type 2 Pima Indians by the time they're 30 have type 2 diabetes. 80%. In certain communities, it's rampant, and in African Americans, it's much higher than whites. It's in Hispanics, it's much higher than whites. So the age can vary, but the pre-diabetes starts early. So we're measuring with function. My company, Function Health, insulin resistance, and we're measuring insulin. And most doctors never measure insulin. I asked Quest, how many doctors are measuring insulin? Probably less than 1% of the lab.
Quest is the testing
company. Yeah, the questing company, yeah. Like less than 1% get measurements for insulin, which is the single biggest thing we have a problem with in America, which is our insulin levels are spiking because of sugar. Insulin, when it's high, causes you to store belly fat. It makes you hungry. It locks the fat in your fat cells and it slows your metabolism. So you're screwed. And you get stuck in this vicious cycle where you have hungry fat that makes you eat more, that makes you want to exercise less. And you get in this cycle of weight gain. Nobody wakes up every day and go, I want to be diabetic. I want to be overweight. I want to gain. Nobody says that.
People do wake up craving sugar cereal and pancakes.
Exactly, because their metabolism and biochemistry has been hijacked by the food industry.
Well, how long does it take to get out of that cycle?
Very quick.
Like how quick?
Well,
let's say you're on a typical American diet and you're waking up with Frosted Flakes.
Yeah.
Hitting some kind of big sandwich and then having pasta for dinner. You're doing that for 10 years. How long does it take you to get out of the cycle?
I actually done this with my patients for decades, and I created a program called the 10-day detox diet. And essentially it's 10 days of treating food addiction. And I wrote a book about it called The 10-Day Detox Diet. I have an online program starting actually in January. People can go to 10daydetox.com. And essentially it guides people through how to reset your biochemistry, your hormones, your gut microbiome, your metabolism very quickly through food. So one of these patients I had in Cleveland Clinic, she started the program and in 3 days she was off her insulin. So the cravings go away in 2 or 3 days. You feel shitty for 2 or 3 days, and then you start reducing symptoms. And what happens is when you take out the bad stuff and put in the good stuff, you see changes across your whole system. Because, when I talk about food as a root cause, it's root cause for so many of the things people are suffering from. So depression and autoimmune diseases and gut issues. And anger. I mean, yeah, it's amazing. And we know
sugar causes anger.
Yes, actually, the data on this
is that?
Pretty interesting. So the amygdala is the reptile brain, fight or flight. It's your reptilian lizard brain. We all have one.
Yeah.
And we have a frontal lobe, which is the grown-up in the room.
Yeah.
So you've got the reptile kind of, and you've got the grown-up. The communication there is important. So when you're walking down the street and you see if a beautiful woman, you say, gee, I'd like to kiss that woman. You don't do it because it's not a good idea for your marriage, right?
Yeah.
Right. You have the frontal lobe going, no, that's probably not a good idea. Or, gee, I like that car over there. I'm going to just take that car. I mean, my car was stolen from my driveway 2 days ago. It was crazy, but that's another story. But people don't have control over their behavior because the amygdala and the frontal lobe communication is interrupted by inflammation. Inflammation in the brain is the root cause of so many of brain issues. So depression is inflammation, autism is inflammation, ADD is inflammation, Alzheimer's is inflammation of the brain. And Chris Palmer is a Harvard psychiatrist who wrote a book called Brain Energy talking about this and how he cured schizophrenia using a ketogenic diet, getting people off of sugar.
Curing schizophrenia?
Yes. So we have I'm saying these things that sound like crazy, heretical. We can reverse Alzheimer's, reverse diabetes.
Well, they are heretical.
Yeah,
by definition, they're heretical. Doesn't mean they're crazy, though.
No, I mean, the science is there. It's like if you actually look online, there's a National Library of Medicine database called PubMed. Anybody can search it. And you can look at these things and you can look them up. They're online. There's studies done. There's plenty of studies, but they don't translate into...
So it sounds like you said so far the ketogenic diet can cure...
diabetes, Alzheimer's, cancer,
and now schizophrenia.
Schizophrenia, yeah.
So will you describe the ketogenic diet just to be?
Yeah, sure. So basically, this is something that was developed for epilepsy years ago because when no drugs work for epilepsy, neurologists realized that if they put people on a diet where their brain was just running on ketones, which is the fuel instead of sugar that the body can run on. Remember, I said we're hybrid AC DC. The gasoline is carbs. And the hybrid electric clean burning fuel is ketones. So when you switch to ketones, it activates the brain's repair systems. It improves mitochondrial function. It reduces inflammation. It helps cognitive function at every level. So I've seen it work from autism to Alzheimer's to schizophrenia to depression.
This is just an all protein diet.
It's not all protein. It's fat. It's actually 75% fat. Olive oil, avocados, nuts and seeds, animal fats, dairy fats, and it basically should be a healthy version of it because you can, eat bacon and that's not a good idea. But you can do healthy ketogenic diets that actually improve health and reverse disease and work across all these things. So sugar is really driving this big problem. Sugar and starch. And by the way, flour, bagel. I mean, I did a lecture the other day, and a woman said, I had a bagel for breakfast. I noticed I had a glucose monitor on my sugar spiked 70 points. She's got a metabolic problem, and you can start to see when you eat these foods, your body gets dysregulated, and when you use a diet that actually shuts off these cravings, that repairs the metabolic dysfunction, that improves insulin sensitivity, it doesn't take long. So it's shocking. In 5 or 10 days, we get a 70% reduction from all symptoms and all diseases by people just changing their diet. And most people, Tucker, don't connect how they feel with what they're eating. They don't make the connection. And so they think they're suffering from all these problems that are related to what they're eating.
Why is it so hard for people to maintain a ketogenic diet?
Well, it's a very extreme diet. I don't think you need to be so extreme. Like a 10-day detox is not keto, but it does probably 80 or 90% of the benefit. So you get to eat more starchy foods.
Well, let's just say you just decide I'm going on a keto diet from now until I die.
Yeah. Probably, what you want to do is use it to fix the problem and then come off it. We were always